When I opened my eyes again, it was the spring night of 1982. My husband, James Miller, was murmuring in his sleep beside my ear. Mia Carter. I love you. In my past life, I foolishly thought he was calling my nickname. This time, I knew better. Mia Carter was the young educated woman who had just been sent down to the countryside. I gently touched my belly, 3 months pregnant, and a cold smile tugged at my lips. James Miller, since heaven has granted me another chance, this time you'll pay the price. Spring rain rizzled outside as I sat in the main room, darning James Miller's socks. The needle pierced through the worn fabric like fate being rewoven. It was March 15, 1982, 6 months before I would die in childbirth in my previous life. Back then, James Miller was busy sneaking around with Mia Carter and wasn't even there when I was giving birth. Natalie, why aren't you asleep yet? James Miller pushed open the door, carrying the faint scent of rouge. My nose twitched. That scent, I knew it all too well. Mia Carter loved her snow cream, a high-end cosmetic she bragged was brought from the city. Waiting for you, I said, setting down the needle and thread. It's late. Still busy with commune work? His face froze for a split second before he recovered. Yeah, the spring plowing season keeps us all busy. Liar. The commune secretary, Ryan Taylor, had said yesterday that there were no shifts tonight. I stood up, my rounded belly showing. Let me heat you some food. No need, he said quickly, avoiding my gaze. I already ate at the commune. You should rest your carrying a child. At the commune? I believed that lie once before. And even praised him for being so considerate. How ridiculous that seems now. Mia Carter lived in the commune's guest house, waiting for her job assignment. But she never intended to stay in this small village. To her, it was just a stepping stone. And James Miller was her perfect stepping stone. James, I heard the new educated youth, Mia Carter, is quite pretty. I asked, feigning curiosity. He stiffened. Who said that? I didn't notice. Zoe Morgan's mother mentioned it. Said Mia looks like one of those city cadres, fair-skinned and refined. Country women love to gossip, he muttered impatiently. I'm taking a bath. He hurried into the backyard, leaving me smiling coldly in the lamplight. James Miller, you really think you're good at hiding things. But the rouge on your skin, your eagerness to scrub yourself clean, that flicker of guilt in your eyes. They've all betrayed you. My hand rested on my belly as my mind turned. In my past life, how did Mia Carter destroy us? First, she seduced James Miller, twisting his heart around her little finger. Then when I went into labor, she faked an illness and lured him into town with her. While I died alone on the birthing bed, she became the new Mrs. Miller. And took every cent of our savings. Later, she left for the provincial capital, abandoning him with nothing but an empty house. I heard he went mad after that, muttering to everyone he met. I'm sorry, Natalie White. But by then, I was long gone. Not this time. This time, I'll live. And I'll pay both of them. Water splashed in the backyard he was bathing. I crept to the window and peered through the crack. James Miller was scrubbing himself hard to hard. What are you trying to wash away, James? Natalie, he suddenly called. I rushed back to the main room and pretended to tidy up my sewing basket. What is it? Nothing. Thought I heard something. He came in, hair dripping, wearing only his undershirt. He looked uneasy, eyes darting away from mine. James, is something bothering you? I asked softly. No, just busy lately. That's good. I smiled faintly. Let me get you a towel. As I passed by him, I pretended to slip. He instinctively caught me, and in that moment, my face brushed close to his. There it was again beneath the soap, the faint, unmistakable scent of rouge. Careful, he said, helping me steady myself, clearly flustered. Thank you, I replied sweetly. Good thing you were here. He looked guilty, eyes clouded. Natalie, I haven't taken good care of you. Haven't taken good care of me? That's putting it mildly. I forced a bashful smile. Don't say that. You've always been so kind to me. His expression twisted guilt, hesitation, fear, and then he turned away. You should rest. There's work tomorrow. I nodded, still smiling. But inside, I was ice. Was he about to confess? Or just spin another lie? It didn't matter. Since he chose betrayal, I'll answer with retribution. That night as he slept, I lay awake, planning. First, I'd gather evidence. Proof of his affair with Mia Carter, his corruption, and her true identity. Second, I'd protect myself and my baby. Last time, I died in childbirth. This time, I'll make sure I don't. Finally, I'll destroy them both water. Ruin his career and make sure she never dares show her face here again. James Miller climbed into bed, lying carefully beside me. Thinking I was asleep, he whispered into the dark. Natalie. I'm sorry. Sorry? What use is that now? He turned his back to me and soon began to snore softly. Then murmured again in his dreams. Mia Carter. Don't go. I'll figure something out. Natalie will never find out. Each word pierced my heart like a knife. But also became the perfect evidence. I quietly rose, fetched paper and pen, and wrote down every word he said. James Miller, you'll never know your wife has returned from the grave. And this time, you'll pay tenfold. The next morning, he ate in a hurry and left, claiming he had a meeting at the commune. No doubt, he was meeting her. I carried a basin of water into the yard and ran into the neighbor, second sister-in-law. Natalie, your James came home pretty late last night, didn't he? She said, eyes full of gossip. Well, commune business, I replied lightly. Commune sure has a lot of business, she said, lowering her voice. That new educated youth, Mia Carter, she's been hanging around the commune every day. My heart gave a jolt. Mia Carter? What's she doing there? Claims she's waiting for her job assignment, she said, leaning closer. But I don't buy it. That girl's pretty as a picture and twice as sly. You didn't hear? The neighbor's wife's second sister-in-law leaned closer, lowering her voice. The very day that girl arrived, she started asking which families in our village are well off, and who holds power at the commune. Once she started gossiping, there was no stopping her. They say her family's got connections in the city. Coming here is just to guilt her or some. In a couple of years, she'll be transferred back. Guilt herself? That was exactly what she did in my last life left after using us, taking all of James Miller's savings with her. Where is she staying now? I asked, pretending not to care. At the commune guest house, second sister-in-law snorted. Says she's waiting for housing. Huh. I think she's waiting for a rich fool to bite. Just then, the sound of a bicycle bell came from the village entrance. James Miller was pedaling back, a faint smile on his face. So early? I asked, stepping forward to greet him. Meeting's over, he said, getting off the bike. I'll go check on the vegetable patch. The patch was east of the village. But James turned west. And the only thing west was the road to the commune guest house. Machel's smile curved my lips. I'll go with you, I offered. No, his reaction was too sharp. You're heavy with child. Stay home and rest. I just want to stretch my legs. The doctor said it's good for the baby. His expression flickered. Then go chat with second sister-in-law. Don't wander around. He turned and hurried off straight toward the west. Second sister-in-law shook her head beside me. Men. The moment they get a taste of something new, they forget the old. I feigned confusion. What do you mean? Nothing, she waved her hands. I'd better get back to my laundry. As soon as she walked away, I followed. James's bicycle was parked right outside the guest house. He stood there talking to Mia Carter. She really was pretty, pale skin, delicate features, and a city girl's refined accent. James, she said softly, tilting her head. Will you really help me get a new job assignment? Of course, James replied, eyes glazed with infatuation. I promised you, didn't I? As long as you don't mind, and just a countryman. Don't be silly, she laughed lightly, stepping closer. You're a commune cadre, capable and respected. Not like some people who do nothing but cry at home all day. Some people? Was she talking about me? Natalie's just innocent, James stammered, a trace of guilt crossing his face. She doesn't understand the outside world. I know you have a soft heart. Mia sighed. But James, don't you think we're better suited? I can help you. I can fight by your side. James's voice trembled as he reached up to touch her cheek. She dodged lightly. Not yet. Wait until you've handled things at home. Handled things at home. She wanted him to divorce me. But Natalie's pregnant, he said uneasily. So what? Mia's tone turned cold. Rural women give birth all the time. What's the big deal? Her words sliced through me like a blade. That casual cruelty. I had died giving birth in my past life while he was at her bedside. I'll figure something out, James promised. I won't make you wait long. Then it's settled. Mia suddenly rose on her toes and pressed a kiss to his cheek. James froze, his face turning scarlet. From the shadows, I saw it all, my fists clenched so tightly my knuckles cracked. So this was my good husband? The man who could betray his pregnant wife for a woman who'd just arrived. After a few more whispered words, James got back on his bicycle and rode home. I took a shortcut and reached the house first, pretending to hang laundry when he came in. Natalie, I'm back, he said, still looking dazed. How's the vegetable patch? I asked, feigning ignorance. Good. Growing well, he replied absently, clearly distracted. His face was glowing, still basking in the thrill of that woman's kiss. One kiss, and he's walking on air. Pathetic. James, I was thinking of going to the commune to buy some fabric, I said casually. For what? To make clothes for the baby. Not today, he said quickly. It's crowded there lately and it's not convenient for you. Not convenient? Or are you just afraid I'll catch you red-handed? All right then, I said, pretending to sound disappointed. He exhaled in relief and placed a hand on my belly. Just a few more months, and we'll have our child. I stared at his hand, disgust twisting in my stomach. The same hand that had just tried to touch her face. Now resting on my unborn child. James, I asked softly, who do you think the baby will look like? Like you, I hope, he said gently. You're kind and pure. I want our child to be like that too. Kind and pure? So that's what I was to him, a naughty fool, easy to deceive. And if it's a boy? Then he'll take after me, James said proudly. He'll grow up to be a cadre to someone with a future. A future? You? Don't make me laugh. I looked at him coldly, already mapping out my next move. If they think I'm easy prey, I'll show them what a reborn Natalie White is truly capable of. That night, James claimed he had to stay at the commune for night duty. Of course he was going to see her. Don't work too hard, I said with a gentle smile. He nodded. You get some rest. Once he disappeared into the dark, I slipped out too. Tonight, I would start gathering evidence. The commune guest house stood at the north end of the village, quiet and dim. I circled around the back, taking the path through the trees. Mia Carter's room was on the second floor, its window facing the grove. I hid behind a tree, perfectly positioned to see inside. Sure enough, James's bicycle was parked below. Warm yellow light glowed through the window, and voices floated down. James, you're so sweet, Mia's syrupy voice cooed. As long as you're happy, he said, full of tender indulgence. I pulled out my paper and pen, ready to record every word. I brought you some pastries, he said. Got them from the county. You're too good to me, she purred. Better than all those city men. Mia, James's voice trembled. What is it? I want to ask, would you really be with me? I'm just a poor countryman. Don't say that, Mia's tone softened, suddenly serious. James, you're the best man I've ever known. But I'm married. And there's the baby. So what? She cut him off with a sneer. Don't countrymen take second wives all the time? Second wife? Her ambition was boundless. But Natalie. What about her? She's just a peasant woman. James, if you want to rise, you can't let dead weight drag you down. I know, but. No buts. Her voice grew sharper, more commanding. Do you want to rot in this village forever? I have city connections. I can get you transferred to the county, maybe even the province. James Miller was silent for a moment. Everything you said, is it true? Of course it's true, Mia Carter replied proudly. My father's a section chief in the provincial government, and my brother's a division chief in the county. As long as you're with me, your future will be limitless. I see. So that's how it was. Mia Carter's background was even more complicated than I'd imagined. No wonder she'd managed to walk away unscathed in my last life after draining James Miller of all his savings. What do you want me to do? James asked. It's simple, she said smoothly. Find a way to make your wife file for divorce herself. That's impossible. Impossible, why not? Mia Carter's smile turned sly. Rural women care most about their reputation. Make her feel humiliated and she'll leave on her own. And how do you plan to do that? You don't need to worry about it, she said mysteriously. I have my ways. Don't worry, I won't make things hard for you. I trembled with rage as I listened. That vicious woman, not only did she want to steal my husband, she wanted to disgrace me too? So that's why I died so miserably in my past life. It had all been her scheme. But Natalie's pregnant. James hesitated, a flicker of guilt in his voice. What if something happens to her? What could happen? Mia snapped impatiently. At worst, she gives birth and you raise the child. Having a son is better than none at all. So she didn't even care whether I lived or died, she just wanted a ready-made heir? Mia Carter, you really have thought of everything, James sighed. Of course, she sneered. I'm not like some people who only know how to cry. James, with me, you'll finally have real happiness. I understand. James's tone hardened. I'll take care of it. Then it's settled. Mia laughed softly. Come on, let's celebrate first. What followed were the faint sounds of rustling clothes and breathless laughter. My heart turned to ice. James Miller, now I truly see what kind of man you are. For the sake of your career and your lover, you'd even sell out your pregnant wife. If that's how it is, then don't blame me for being ruthless. I quietly slipped out of the woods, my plan already clear in my mind. Since Mia Carter wanted me to ask for a divorce, I'd play along that in the end, we'd see who really got humiliated. That night, I wrote several letters. One to the county committee, reporting James Miller for corruption. One to the provincial office, exposing Mia Carter's true identity. And one to her family, detailing their daughter's disgraceful behavior in the countryside. When I finished, I gathered every bit of evidence I could find. James's embezzlement ledger, Mia's list of gifts received, and the records of their secret meetings. I'd seen them all in my previous life. This time, I'd use them well. By the time James returned home, dawn was just breaking. He thought I was asleep and crept in quietly. Through the crack in the door, I saw his face as mug and satisfied. Men. Once they've had their fill, they forget everything else. Natalie, James opened the door. I pretended to wake up. You're back, it's so late. Work at the commune, he lied easily. Why aren't you asleep? My stomach's a little uncomfortable, I said, frowning. Maybe the baby's moving. His expression shifted. Should we see a doctor? No, I'm fine. Probably just tired. I smiled faintly. Stay and talk with me. All right. He sat on the bed. What do you want to talk about? About the future. I looked at him. When the baby's born, have you thought of a name? He hesitated. I haven't really thought about it. Of course not. His head was full of Mia Carter had long forgotten me and the child. I came up with a few. I said softly. If it's a boy, let's call him Daniel Wilson, someone with great ambition. That's nice, he replied absently. And if it's a girl? He frowned. If it's a girl, just name her whatever you want. Whatever? So that's how little he cared for his own daughter. James, do you not like girls? I asked. It's not that, he said. It's just boys are easier to raise. Girls will marry out eventually. So once a girl's married, she's no longer your child. His outdated mindset made my stomach twist with disgust. And if I give birth to a girl, will you be disappointed? No, he lied. As long as you and the baby are safe, I'll be happy. Safe? In my past life, where were you when I was dying in childbirth? You were with Mia Carter, taking her to the clinic. You never even saw me one last time. James, I said softly, sometimes I wonder if something ever happened to me, what would you do? He stiffened. Don't say that you'll be fine. I mean if. I held his gaze. If I die, would you marry someone else? Never, he said instantly. You're the only woman I'll ever love. The only one? Then what was Mia Carter? James Miller, you lie without even blinking. Since you can be heartless, don't blame me for being cruel. This game, we'll see who wins. The next morning, I went to the post office and mailed all the letters. On my way out, I ran into Mia Carter. She was dressed in a neat blue blouse, her hair perfectly combed, far more refined than any village girl. You must be James's wife? She said with a practiced smile. And you are? I pretended not to know her. I'm Mia Carter, the new educated youth assigned here, she said, extending a hand. I've heard a lot about you. Heard a lot about me? What's there to hear about a country woman like me? Nice to meet you, I replied politely. I heard you're from the city? Yes, from the provincial capital, she said, pride gleaming in her eyes. James has been helping me a lot with the placement work. James? So familiar already. Thank you then, I said with a gentle smile. James loves helping others. He really is a good man, she said meaningfully, eyes glinting. But you look quite far along in your pregnancy, better take it easy. Yes, just a few more months to go, I said, touching my stomach. I might have to trouble you all to look after James then. A flicker of triumph flashed in her eyes. Of course. We're all friends here. Friends? What a special kind of friendship. Comrade Mia Carter, I said kindly, you must find it hard to adjust here in the countryside. Not really, she smiled. Everyone's been very kind, especially James. He's been such a big help. Every time she said his name, her tone grew sweeter, more intimate. Was this her way of declaring war? That's good, I replied warmly. If you ever need help, don't hesitate to ask. Thank you, sister-in-law, you're so kind. Mia Carter smiled sweetly, but then added, still, with your condition, you should focus on taking care of yourself. The same old routine. On the surface, it sounded caring, but in truth, she was reminding me that I was just a pregnant woman, not fit to meddle in others' business. I know, I said, nodding. I'll be going now, there's still something I need to do at home. All right then, take care, sister-in-law. Mia Carter waved with a polite smile. I turned and walked away, my lips curling into a cold sneer. Mia Carter really was clever, testing the waters before making her next move. Too bad for her, I had been reborn. Every one of her schemes was already laid bare before me. Back home, I began preparing for the night's work. It was time to gather more evidence, especially the hard proof of James Miller's corruption. In my previous life, I had once stumbled upon a small metal box James had hidden beneath the bed. Inside were ledgers and receipts, records of every dirty deal he'd made. He thought he'd hidden it well. While he was out, I lifted the bedboard and, sure enough, found the same small box. Opening it, I saw page after page of detailed notes. Michael Evans house repairs, 50 yuan bribe. Chris Anderson son joining the army, cigarettes and liquor. Matthew Scott housing allocation, 100 yuan cash. Every transaction recorded neatly and clearly. A self-written confession. I copied down the key details and carefully put everything back in its place. Alongside the ledgers, I found something else, letters from Mia Carter to James Miller. The stationery was delicate, the handwriting neat and graceful, but the words were revolting. James, you're the most capable man I've ever met. With you, I felt happiness I never knew before. Once we're together, I'll make sure to repay your love. It was nauseantly sweet. And worse still, tucked inside one envelope was a photograph. Mia Carter in a white blouse, smiling coyly at the camera. On the back and looping script, she had written, "To my dearest James." I gathered all the evidence carefully, my plan growing sharper by the minute. That evening, James Miller came home. "Natalie, what did you do today?" he asked casually. "Nothing much," I said calmly. "I just went to the post office to send a letter to my mother." His face tightened. "A letter? What kind of letter?" "Just to tell her I'm fine," I replied, feigning confusion. "Why, is something wrong?" He forced a smile. "No, nothing, just asking." He thought I'd really written to my mother. If only he knew that what I'd mailed were reports, not letters. "Oh, by the way," I said deliberately, "I ran into Comrade Mia Carter today." James froze. "Where?" "At the post office," I replied, watching his face closely. "She's a nice girl. He even praised you for being so helpful." "Is that so?" He tried to stay calm. "Did she say anything else?" "Not really," I said casually. "She just seemed a little troubled though." Her face looked pale. "Troubled?" James's tone grew anxious. "What kind of trouble?" "I don't know. Maybe something to do with work." I tilted my head. "You're friends, aren't you? You should check on her." His eyes flickered uncertainly, clearly his mind was elsewhere. "James," I asked softly, "is there something you're not telling me?" "No, of course not." He looked away. "I just feel like you've been distracted lately," I continued, watching him carefully. "Is there some problem at work?" "Work's fine," he said, forcing a weak smile. "Maybe I'm just tired." "Tired?" Of course he was tired, working by day, cheating by night. "Then go rest," I said gently. "I'll make dinner." "No need. I'm not hungry," he muttered, getting to his feet. "I've got a meeting at the commune." The same excuse again. "So late?" I asked with feigned concern. "You should take care of your health." "Can't be helped," he said hurriedly, already halfway out the door. "Don't wait up for me." I watched his back disappear into the night and let out a cold laugh. So Mia Carter's face didn't look good, and he couldn't sit still? What a lovesick fool. As soon as he was gone, I slipped out too. Tonight, I would move on to the second phase of my plan. If they wanted me to beg for a divorce, I'd give them a surprise instead. Let's see who ends up humiliated. When the village fell silent, I made my way toward the commune. James's bicycle was right where I expected it, parked under the guest house. This time, I didn't bother hiding in the woods. I walked straight to the building and looked up. Mia Carter's window on the second floor was open. Voices drifted down. "James," she said proudly, "I saw your wife today." "You saw Natalie?" His voice tightened. "Did she suspect anything?" "No, she was perfectly polite," Mia said with a laugh. "She really is a typical country woman, simple and naive." "That's good." Relief seeped into James's tone. "But James," Mia's voice turned sharp, "we can't keep sneaking around like this. The longer it drags on, the greater the risk." "What do you mean?" "I've already got a plan," she said coldly. "Since she cares so much about her reputation, we'll make her lose it completely." "What?" "It's simple," Mia said, her voice dripping with malice. "We'll make sure the whole village knows you have a new lover. A woman like her can't stand that kind of shame. She'll ask for a divorce herself." James hesitated. "Isn't that going too far?" "Too far," Mia scoffed. "James, you have to decide, do you want her pride, or our future?" "I want to be with you," he said through gritted teeth. "But Natalie will be heartbroken." "Better a short heartbreak than a lifetime of misery," Mia said flatly. "She'll find out sooner or later. We might as well be open about it." "Open about it?" What a shameless way to dress up adultery. "So what's your plan?" he asked. "Tomorrow's market day," Mia said, her tone full of confidence. "Everyone in the village will be there. I'll confess to you in front of everyone, let them all see our love." My blood ran cold. That venomous woman was planning to humiliate me publicly? "Is that really appropriate?" James asked uncertainly. "What's inappropriate about it?" she sneered. "It'll come out eventually. Sooner or later makes no difference." "But Natalie's pregnant," he said weakly. "What if she gets too upset?" All the better, Mia cut in viciously. If she loses the baby, you'll be free to divorce her immediately. Rage coursed through me. This woman wanted to kill my child. Mia, how can you say that? Even James sounded shocked. What's wrong with it? She retorted. If you truly love me, you can't afford to be soft-hearted. I understand. His voice faltered, then steadied. I'll do as you say. That's my James. Mia's tone softened, satisfied. Don't worry, once this is over, I'll make sure you rise to the top. I had heard enough. Quietly, I turned and slipped away from the guest house, fury burning in my veins. James Miller. Mia Carter. You really think I'm some weak, pliant fool? If you want a show at tomorrow's market, I'll give you one. But the ending won't be what you expect. Back home, I stayed up through the night, putting everything in order. First, I wrote a full report detailing every one of their crimes. Their affair, the exact times and places, the money James had taken, the truth about Mia Carter's background. Then I prepared a few props. In my past life, I'd seen Mia Carter's true face and I knew exactly what secrets she was hiding. For example, she wasn't a director's daughter at all, she was a fraud who had stolen someone else's identity. Her real background, she was the daughter of an actress. Because she was pretty, someone had packaged her as a sent-down youth. Her goal was simple: find a wealthy, influential man as a stepping stone to return to city life and live in comfort. And I had the proof to back it all up. Finally, I prepared a trump card. Mia Carter's child. Yes, Mia Carter was already pregnant, but she had kept it secret from everyone. Even James Miller had no idea that the child wasn't his. The father was an officer she had known before coming here. That officer was already married, making it impossible for him to marry her. So she came to this remote village, looking for a fool to take the fall. James Miller was her chosen mark. In my past life, she had succeeded. James Miller never learned the truth until his death. This time, I would expose everything to the world. Tomorrow's market would be unforgettable. Mia Carter, you think you can humiliate me? Dream on. I would make sure she lost face in front of the entire village, so she would never dare stay here again. As for James Miller, since he chose betrayal, he would have to pay the price. I gently touched my belly and whispered, "Baby, Mommy will protect you. No one will hurt us." The baby seemed to respond, stirring softly inside me. Was that courage for me? All right then, tomorrow, we fight together. James Miller returned late that night, a complex expression on his face. It seemed even he was anxious about tomorrow's plan. "Natalie, you're still awake?" he asked softly. "Waiting for you," I said with a gentle smile. "Tomorrow's market day you'll go, won't you?" James froze. "Go just to pick up a few things." "Then I'll go too," I said deliberately. It's been so long since I'd been to the market. "You shouldn't, your condition," he hurriedly protested. "It's fine. The doctor said some activity is good for the baby," I insisted. "And I want to buy a few things for the child." James's face darkened, but he couldn't refuse outright. Watch yourself then," he said reluctantly. "Don't worry. With you by my side, I'm not afraid of anything." I leaned against him. He awkwardly wrapped his arms around me, but his mind was clearly elsewhere. What a hypocritical man. Tomorrow was the day of reckoning. I would show them both what it meant to shoot themselves in the foot. The market morning dawned bright and sunny. I dressed carefully, even pregnant, I looked radiant. "Natalie, you look beautiful today," James said, his voice insincere, eyes darting nervously. "Thank you," I said sweetly. "Shall we go?" The market sprawled across the grand square in front of the commune, bustling more than usual. Vendors lined every corner, and villagers bustled about. I linked arms with James, playing the part of the blissful wife. "James!" A delicate voice rang out. Mia Carter walked over, wearing a white dress and little shoes. She looked immaculate, her hair in soft waves, lips bright red. "Comrade Mia Carter," James feigned surprise. "You're at the market too?" "Yes, just to pick up a few things." She glanced meaningfully at me. "Sister-in-law is here too." Yes, just accompanying James. I smiled gently. That's great. Let's shop together, she suggested, taking the initiative. And so, the three of us moved through the market. I noticed Mia deliberately walking close to James, occasionally brushing his arm. James, while outwardly attentive to me, kept sneaking glances at her. Villagers whispered as they watched. Why is that city girl always with James? Yes, and Natalie is pregnant, shouldn't she be careful? She's always cozying up to a married man. Mia's expression flickered at the gossip, but she quickly masked it with a smile. James, I want to buy some fabric to make clothes. Will you help me pick? She cooed. James hesitated, glancing at me. Go ahead. I'll wait here, I said understandably. All right, we'll be quick, James said with relief. I trailed behind them silently, listening. James, what do you think of this fabric? Mia deliberately tugged his hand to feel the cloth. Looks good, James said nervously. If you like it, buy it. But it's too expensive, I can't afford it, she pretended to object. How much? I'll pay. Without hesitation, he handed over the money. You're so good to me, James, she said, touched. Better than any man I've ever known. Then, brazenly, she tiptoed and kissed him on the cheek. The villagers froze. My God, how could she? James has a wife and child, she's blatantly ruining a family. Right there in broad daylight. James flushed crimson, caught between shock and unwillingness to push her away. Mia basked in the attention, enjoying every gaze. This was her plan, a public declaration to humiliate me. But she didn't know I was ready for my counterattack. Mia Carter, I suddenly shouted. Everyone turned, including Mia and James. Sister-in-law, I can explain. Mia feigned panic. No need, I said coldly. I saw everything. The villagers' whispers grew louder. Natalie's been humiliated, her husband's being stolen. That girl is outrageous, and she's pregnant. Mia, inwardly pleased with herself, outwardly feigned remorse. Sister-in-law, I'm sorry, I couldn't control my feelings. Couldn't control? I advanced, raising my voice. Mia Carter, did it ever occur to you about the child in my womb while you were seducing a married man? Her face changed, she hadn't expected me to be so direct. I didn't seduce him, she stammered. Didn't seduce? Then what was that kiss just now? I sneered. That was because she couldn't find words. Because what? Because you love him? I pressed. She gritted her teeth, deciding to go all in. Yes, I love James. What's wrong with that? A murmur of shock swept through the crowd. Shameless. Poor Natalie. A woman like that should be driven out of the village. Mia thought my heart would break at her words, but I smiled. Love him? I stared at her. Mia Carter, are you sure you love him or just his position? Her face fell. What do you mean? It's simple. I pulled out a letter from my pocket, her love letter to my husband. Do you all want to hear it? Mia went pale. She tried to snatch the letter, but I dodged. James, you're the most capable man I've ever met. Being with you, I felt happiness I never knew before. The villagers exchanged stunned glances. There's more. I continued, reading aloud. When my father helps get you transferred to the county, then we can be together openly. Stop reading, Mia screamed, rushing toward me. What? Feeling guilty? I dodged her. Villagers, did you hear that? She doesn't love my husband, she's using him to climb the ladder. The villagers erupted. So that's it. Using James to rise and get rich. Her scheming is terrible. Mia's face turned ashen. She tried to respond, but no words came. James was dumbfounded too, never expecting her private intentions. And there's more, I said, producing another item. Mia Carter, do you want everyone to know your true identity? Seeing what I held, she sank to the ground in defeat. It was a photograph and several documents. Comrade Mia Carter, didn't you say your father was a provincial director? I sneered, holding up the photos. Then who's this? The photos showed a woman in a stage costume who looked exactly like Mia Carter. That's your mother, right? An actress in a traveling troupe. And where did this director father of yours come from? I shouted. Mia Carter went pale and tried to snatch the photos. And this? I pulled out a document. This is your real file, Mia Carter, female, 22 years old, daughter of two theater actors. Because she's pretty, she was packaged as a sent-down youth. The villagers' jaws dropped. So it's fake. A fraud, a complete fraud. Claiming to be some city big hot, all lies. Mia Carter collapsed, slumping to the ground. Where did you get these? She stammered, trembling. Want to know? I looked down at her from above. Because I've known exactly who you are all along. No, it can't be impossible, she muttered. There's more. I reached into my pocket and held out my final piece. Mia Carter, whose child is in your womb. A heavy silence fell over the crowd. Mia Carter's face went deathly pale, her eyes wide with fear. Why, you're lying, she tried to deny. Lying? I sneered. Why don't we go to the county hospital and check? She trembled, unable to speak. James Miller was stunned. Mia Carter, you're pregnant? I am not, she tried to deny again. Not. I pulled out a medical report. This is your checkup from the county hospital last month. It clearly says you're 2 months pregnant. James snatched the report and read it, his expression frozen. 2 months. He calculated the time. That we hadn't. That's right, I nodded. You hadn't started your affair yet. This child is obviously not yours. James Miller looked like he had been struck by lightning, his eyes burning with fury at Mia Carter. Mia Carter, explain this. What's going on? She slumped to the ground in utter despair, saying nothing. I pressed on. Villagers, do you want to know who the father of this child is? Yes, they chorused. It's Captain Jack Thomas from the county, a married man, I said coldly. Mia Carter had an affair with him while in the city. When she became pregnant, he abandoned her, so she came here looking for a fool to take her place. And my husband, James Miller, was her chosen mark. The villagers erupted in outrage. Shameless. Pregnant with another man's child and deceiving everyone. Such a woman deserves to be thrown into a pond. James Miller's face went ashen. You really are carrying someone else's child? Mia Carter finally broke down, crying. James, I love you, I really do. Love me, James roared. You're carrying another man's child, and you say you love me? That child, it's nothing, I can give it up, she cried. Give it up? James's anger boiled over. Do you take me for a fool? She tried to grab his hand, but he flung her away violently. Leave, get out of here, James shouted. I don't want to see you again. Mia Carter sobbed, her tears streaming, but no one felt sorry for her. The villagers' chatter rose like waves. Serves her right, a liar deserves this. Trying to destroy a family, now she's paying the price. Natalie saw right through her from the start. I looked down at Mia Carter on the ground. Not a shred of sympathy remained. In my past life, she had killed me and my child. This time it was her turn to experience scorn. Comrade Mia Carter, do you still think I'm a weak rural woman you can bully? I asked coldly. She raised her head, eyes full of hatred. How could you know all this? Want to know? I smiled. I'm far smarter than you. Know these secrets no one could know, she whispered. Justice may be slow, but it never misses. Do bad deeds, and you'll get caught, I said, looking down at her. Mia Carter was completely hopeless. She ran out of the market crying. The villagers shook their heads as they watched her retreat. Such a woman deserves it. Natalie is brilliant, she exposed Mia's true nature instantly. Even James finally saw clearly. I turned to James Miller, who hung his head, looking miserable. James, now you know what kind of person she is, don't you? I said calmly. He lifted his head, guilt and regret written all over his face. Natalie, I am sorry. Sorry? I sneered. Do you think one sorry makes it enough? James froze, stunned by my words. Natalie, you knew all along, he asked, trembling. What wouldn't I know? I stared at him. Your secret meetings at the guest house, the gifts you gave her, your plan to make me divorce you, I knew everything. James Miller sat there, struck dumb. You knew then, why didn't you stop it? Stop it. I laughed mockingly. Why would I? I wanted you to reveal your true selves, so everyone could see exactly what kind of people you are. The villagers turned to James Miller with disdain. James, you're so disappointing. Natalie is carrying your child, and you betray her. What a heartless man. James couldn't lift his head under the villagers' scorn. Natalie, I was wrong, I really was wrong, he knelt, begging for forgiveness. Forgive you? I touched my belly. What about the child inside me? Did you think about the child when you betrayed us? James cried, tears streaming down his face. I was blinded, I deserve it. You do, I said coldly, but I will not forgive you. With that, I turned and walked away from the market. Behind me, James Miller's cries mixed with the villagers' chatter. I didn't look back. The drama was over, and I had won completely. Mia Carter was disgraced, and James Miller had lost everyone's respect. As for me, though battered, both my child and I were safe. That was enough. Mia Carter's scandal soon spread throughout the county. She left the town in shame and fury, reportedly returning to the provincial city, never to be heard from again. James Miller's life became miserable. The villagers despised his actions and shunned him. The commune leaders were disappointed as well. Combined with the letters I had sent earlier, James Miller was quickly investigated. His corruption and bribery were proven, costing him his job and putting him at risk of legal consequences. And I? I remained the pitiable woman who had survived. Natalie, you're brilliant, my second sister-in-law praised. I knew that Vixen wasn't a good person. Yes, if you hadn't exposed her, James would have been completely deceived, my third aunt added. I smiled faintly. I was just lucky to know her secrets. Luck? This is wisdom, the village chief's wife said. You're our village's very own Zhuge Liang. Their praise warmed my heart, but more importantly, my child and I were safe. James Miller was locked up in the county, awaiting trial. Before leaving, he knelt before me, crying and begging. Natalie, I know I was wrong, please give me one more chance. One more chance. I looked at him coldly. Did you ever give me a chance when you betrayed me? I was blinded at the time. Blinded, I sneered. James Miller, don't make excuses for yourself. You are a heartless, unprincipled man. James Miller was left speechless by my words. Natalie, for the sake of the child, he started. The child, I touched my belly. This child has only me as family. He doesn't need a father like you. You can't, the child is innocent, he pleaded. Innocent? I glared at him. Where were you last life when I was in labor? With Mia Carter, going to see her at the hospital. And now you have the nerve to talk about innocence. James Miller froze. Last life? What are you talking about? Realizing I'd said too much, I quickly corrected myself. I mean, if something had happened to me, where would you have been? He fell silent, knowing he had already lost everything. Natalie, what should I do? He asked in despair. Go to prison and reflect properly, I said, turning away. I hope you understand what it means to have a moral bottom line. Watching James Miller being taken away, my emotions were a mix of bitterness and satisfaction. In my previous life, I devoted myself to him and received nothing but betrayal and death in return. This life, I had my revenge, but at the cost of losing my husband. But that was fine. A man who could betray me wasn't worth keeping. My child and I would have a better future. A few months later, I successfully gave birth to a son. He was healthy, with a loud tiger-like cry. Natalie, he looks just like you, the midwife exclaimed happily. I gazed at the little life in my arms, feeling an overwhelming tenderness. Welcome to this world, my baby, I whispered, gently stroking his cheek. Mommy will protect you and make sure you grow up happy and healthy. He seemed to understand, stopping his crying and staring at me with wide eyes. In that moment, all the suffering felt worth it. For this child, I could endure anything. At his full-month celebration, the villagers all came to offer their congratulations. Natalie, you're so strong. Raising a child alone is not easy. If you need help, just say the word. This child will grow up great, just like his clever mother. Holding my son, my heart swelled with gratitude. Despite losing my husband, I had gained the respect and love of the villagers. More importantly, I had this precious little boy. Life had meaning again. James Miller spent 3 years in prison. By the time he got out, he was a broken man. He once tried to see our child, but I refused. You no longer have the right to be this child's father, I said coldly. James Miller nodded painfully, then left quietly. He never appeared again. I heard he went far away and never returned. I, however, began a new life with my son. He was intelligent, walking and talking early. The villagers all praised him, saying he would surely attend university one day. And that was exactly what I hoped, to give him the best education and ensure he grew into a capable, virtuous person. Someone who would never betray like his father. Time flew. My son was already 5 years old. He was adorable and clever, my greatest pride. "Mommy, where's Daddy?" he asked one day. I paused, then gently stroked his head. "Daddy went very far away. He probably won't be coming back." "Why?" he asked, confused. "Because he wasn't a good man. Mommy doesn't want you to see him," I said honestly. He nodded, seemingly understanding. "Then Mommy is enough for me." Hearing that, I nearly cried. "Yes, as long as we have each other, that's enough." I hugged him tightly. "Mommy will always love and protect you." This was my new life after rebirth. Though I had suffered betrayal and pain, I had finally gained the most precious thing, my adorable son, and a chance to start over. As for James Miller and Mia Carter, they were in the past. I no longer hated them, nor did I miss them. My focus was on raising my son to be a kind and upright person, someone who would never betray like his father. When my son turned 10, I received unexpected news: James Miller had died. He reportedly passed away from illness in a distant place, with no one by his side. The villagers came to tell me, thinking I would be sad. But my heart was calm, like still water. "Mom, who is that man?" my son asked, overhearing the villagers. "An unimportant person," I replied lightly. "You don't need to know." He nodded and went back to playing with his toys. He had always been considerate, never asking too much about his father, perhaps sensing I didn't want to talk about him. That was fine, it kept unpleasant memories buried. James Miller's death marked the definitive end of my past life. From then on, I was simply Natalie White, a single mother living with her son. Life was peaceful and fulfilling. I ran a small village shop, which provided enough to support both of us. My son excelled at school, and the teachers adored him. "Natalie, your son is incredibly smart," the principal praised. "He's bound to get into a top university." "That's thanks to his own effort," I replied modestly. "Not just effort, but talent," the principal said seriously. "And his character is excellent, he never lies or bullies others." I felt deeply gratified. At least I had raised my son well, he would never grow up to be a despicable man like his father. By the time he was 15, he had been admitted to the best high school in the county. That day he came home, beaming. "Mom, I got in," he said, holding his acceptance letter, eyes shining. "Wonderful," I exclaimed, hugging him tightly. "Mom is so proud of you." "Mom, I'll study hard and go to university, so you can live well," he said earnestly. "Foolish child, I'm already happy," I said, patting his head. "As long as you're healthy and happy, that's all I wish for." In that moment, I felt like the happiest mother in the world. Though I had suffered betrayal and heartache, I had received the greatest compensation, this exceptional son, a gift from heaven. Throughout high school, he continued to excel. Not only academically, but he also actively participated in extracurricular activities and was recognized as an outstanding student leader. "Natalie, your son is amazing," the villagers said enviously. "He's destined for great things." "He's just sensible," I replied with a faint smile. But in my heart, I was prouder than anyone. He had always been thoughtful, never worrying me unnecessarily. Perhaps lacking a father, he cherished every moment with me. Every time he came home, the first thing he did was help me with chores, then chat with me. "Mom, are you tired?" he would always ask. "Not at all," I would reply. "Seeing you grow up so well makes any tiredness worth it." When the college entrance exams came, he performed brilliantly and was admitted to a top provincial university. On the day the acceptance letters arrived, the entire village came to celebrate. "Natalie, you've raised such a fine son," they said. I smiled, knowing he had earned it through hard work, talent, and a good heart. "This child will surely become a pillar of the nation. You and your son have truly been through so much, and now your hardships have finally paid off." I looked at the acceptance letter in my hands and couldn't hold back my tears. This was more than just a piece of paper. It represented years of effort, dedication, and perseverance for both of us. From the moment James Miller betrayed me, I had vowed to raise my son to be someone capable, and now the dream had finally come true. "Mom, why are you crying?" my son asked, concerned. "I'm just happy," I replied, wiping my tears. "Mommy is so proud of you. Mom, after I graduate from college and get a good job, I'll take you to the city so you can enjoy life," he said earnestly. "All right, Mommy will wait for that day," I nodded. Though I didn't know exactly when it would come, I trusted that my son would achieve it. He had always been a child of his word, never breaking promises. On the day he left for college, I accompanied him to the station. Watching him walk away with his luggage, I felt a bittersweet mixture of pride and sorrow. I was happy that he was finally venturing into a broader world, but I also missed him dearly. From his birth until now, we had never been apart for such a long time. "Natalie, don't be sad," my second sister-in-law comforted me. "Children grow up, and eventually, they have to be independent." "I know," I said, nodding, though I still felt a little uneasy. "When he graduates, he'll bring you to enjoy life," she said admiringly. "All your struggles these years finally paid off." "Yes, finally all the suffering has been worth it," I replied. 18 years had passed since James Miller's betrayal. I had raised a baby in my arms into a university student. This was my greatest accomplishment in life. Though the journey was difficult, the result was beautiful. Now I could proudly say, I won. I had won not only against James Miller and Mia Carter but, more importantly, I had raised an exceptional son. That was far more precious than any other victory. After graduation, my son did indeed find a great job and engineering position at a state-owned enterprise in the provincial capital, with a solid income and a bright future. He kept his promise and brought me to the city. "Mom, this is our new home," he said, pointing to a cozy two-bedroom apartment. It wasn't large, but it was perfect for us. I looked around the bright and clean space, touched by his thoughtfulness. He had bought it with his own savings, and though modest, it was warmly decorated. "This is wonderful," I said, moved. "I never imagined living in a place like this." "Mom, this is just the beginning," he said seriously. "After I work hard for a few years, I'll buy you an even better home." "That's enough, really enough," I shook my head. "Mommy is already satisfied." And I truly was. From a rural woman betrayed by her husband to a city resident, this transformation felt almost unbelievable even to me. Without rebirth, without that moment of retaliation, I might have died on the labor table and never experienced this happiness. "Mom, I'm ready to get married," my son suddenly told me one day. "Really?" I asked, pleasantly surprised. "Who is she? When did you meet her?" "She's my colleague, Julia Reed." "She's wonderful," he said shyly. "I want to bring her to meet you." "Of course. That's great." I nodded enthusiastically. "When?" "Next Sunday." "Well then, I'll prepare properly," I said, planning the dishes I'd cook. A week later, my son returned with his girlfriend. Julia Reed was gentle and well-mannered. "Hello, Auntie," she greeted me politely. "Please come in, sit down," I said warmly. After the meal, I was very satisfied with her. Not only was she beautiful, but she was also mature, courteous, and thoughtful. Most importantly, the love in her eyes for my son was genuine, not fake or superficial. Mom, what do you think of Julia? My son asked that evening. She's a wonderful girl, I said, nodding. When are you getting married? Next spring, he replied. I want to give her a perfect wedding. Good, Mommy supports you, I said, patting his shoulder. As long as you love each other, that's all that matters. Watching the happiness on his face, I felt a profound sense of contentment. He had found true love, and nothing was more important than that. In the VIP ward of Renai Hospital, Ella Davis curled up on the hospital bed, both hands protectively covering her slightly swollen belly. 3 months into her pregnancy, she often felt exhausted, but right now, every muscle in her body was taut, like a cornered animal bracing for the final blow. Just 400 cc of blood. Don't act like I'm asking for your life, Samuel Reed said coldly, standing beside the bed in a sharp black suit that only made his presence more intimidating. He yanked her hands away from her stomach and turned to the nurse. Draw it. If it's not enough, add another 200. Mr. Reed, sir. Your wife is pregnant. This isn't. The elderly nurse hesitated. I said draw. Samuel cut her off, his voice like a blade dipped in ice. Natalie's still waiting in surgery. Ella's face turned ghostly pale. Her lips trembled. Samuel, have you been feeling dizzy lately? Could we maybe? Ella Davis. Samuel leaned down, his long fingers gripping her chin hard. When you schemed your way into my bed, you didn't seem this fragile, did you? The words stabbed straight into Ella's heart. Everyone believed that their marriage, born from a business alliance 3 years ago, was something she had plotted for. No one, least of all Samuel, believed she had been a victim to. When the needle pierced her vein, Ella bit down on her lip. As the blood drained from her body, a wave of dizziness hit her. Then came the sharp, tearing pain in her lower abdomen. Mr. Reed, something's wrong, she's bleeding, the nurse cried out. Ella looked down and saw blood gushing between her legs, soaking the sheets in seconds. The pain was unbearable, her vision going black around the edges. In the distance, she could still hear Samuel's voice, cold and detached. Save Natalie first. Find another doctor for this one. When Ella opened her eyes again, she was on the operating table. The glaring surgical lights made her flinch. The searing pain in her lower body told her the truth before anyone could say it. The baby was gone. Miscarriage at 12 weeks, severe hemorrhage, the doctor said. Prepare for uterine curettage. Where's the anesthesiologist? She has a rare blood condition, came the reply. Anesthetics may not work. The icy metal instruments entered her body before she could protest. Without anesthesia, the pain was excruciating. Her back arched involuntarily, fingernails digging bloody grooves into the operating table. She bit down on a towel, her muffled cries sounding like the last desperate whimpers of a dying creature. Her blood pressure's crashing. We need a transfusion. We can't. Her blood type isn't in stock anywhere in the city. Through the haze, Ella heard the doctor making a call. Mr. Reed, your wife's condition is critical. We need your... Samuel's voice came through, cold and indifferent. I'm with Natalie right now. Don't bother me with trivial matters. A single tear slipped from the corner of Ella's eye, disappearing into the pool of blood below. The surgery lasted 3 hours. When she was finally wheeled back to her room, it was past midnight. A nurse changed her into a clean gown, muttering under her breath, poor thing. Who draws that much blood from a pregnant woman? The door opened. Samuel walked in, freshly changed into another suit, the faint scent of disinfectant clinging to him. He had clearly just come from Natalie White's ward. The doctor said your body isn't suitable for pregnancy, he said flatly. This, accident might be a blessing in disguise. Mila stared up at the ceiling, her voice barely above a whisper. Last week's checkup showed I have a hereditary blood disease. She turned her head slowly toward him. Pregnancy worsens it. Samuel frowned. So? So, I knew I could die. But I still wanted to keep the baby. Mila smiled weakly, tears streaming down her face. Now the baby's gone, and soon I'll be gone too. You'll finally be free to marry Natalie White. For a moment, Samuel's expression faltered, but only for a moment. Then the cold mask returned. Enough with the theatrics. Get some rest. I'll have someone discharge you tomorrow. When the door closed behind him, Ella curled into herself, clutching her aching belly. The pain there was nothing compared to the agony in her chest. She lifted her arm and dragged a fingernail across her wrist, leaving a thin line of blood. It hurt, but at least it reminded her she was still alive. 3 months later, Renai Hospital, Hematology Department. Miss Davis, your condition has entered the terminal stage, said Dr. Aaron Collins, pushing up his glasses. His voice was heavy. If we begin aggressive treatment. How long do I have? Beneath the wide sleeve of her blouse, her wrists were crisscrossed with old scars. Aaron sighed. 3 months. At most. When she left the hospital, Ella bought a small black notebook. On the first page, she wrote, "Today marks 93 days since my baby left me. The doctor says I'll be joining him soon." Then she drew a blade across her arm, letting blood drip onto the number 93. It hurt, but not even a fraction as much as the pain in her heart. Back at the Reed family estate, Ella went straight to the guest room. She hadn't set foot in the master bedroom since the night of her miscarriage. From the closet, she retrieved a small locked box. Inside were several USB drives and a diary. "Found new evidence today," she wrote. "Natalie White has been manipulating the overseas accounts of Reed Group. If Samuel doesn't catch on soon, he could go to prison for it." She paused, then added, "I need to find a way to warn him without letting him know it's me." After closing her diary, Ella inserted one of the USB drives into her laptop. A surveillance video popped up on the screen, Natalie White pouring a white powder into Ella's bird's nest soup. It had been captured by the hidden camera Ella secretly installed in the kitchen last month. In another drive, there was a recording of a conversation between Natalie and her mother, Mia Carter. "That radioactive substance in the aromatherapy oil will do it," Mia's voice said. "Within 3 months she'll miscarry for sure." Ella Davis shut off the recording, her hands trembling slightly. The evidence she had collected was more than enough to send Natalie White and her mother to prison, but she still hadn't acted. Part of her didn't want to shatter Samuel Reed's image of the perfect sister. Another part, bitterly, wondered what difference it made. She was already dying. At the top floor of the Reed Group Tower, Samuel Reed was reviewing documents when Owen Parker rushed in. "Mr. Reed, someone is acquiring shares of our overseas subsidiaries." "Find out who," Samuel said tersely. Owen hesitated. "It's hard to trace. They're operating through a dozen shell companies." He handed over some files. "But there's a strange coincidence. All these companies are registered in the countries your wife studied in." Samuel frowned. Ever since the miscarriage, he and Ella Davis had become strangers to each other. He tugged irritably at his loosened tie and noticed something missing: his cufflinks. The ones Ella had given him for his birthday last year. Back in the master bedroom, Samuel rifled through his things and knocked over a small box. A stack of medical records spilled out. On top was a certificate from Renai Hospital. Late-stage hereditary blood disorder. Immediate termination of pregnancy and treatment recommended. The date was the day before he had for Stella to give blood. His hands trembled as he dug further. In the deepest corner of the closet, he found a locked box. He smashed it open. Inside was a blood-stained notebook and several USB drives. The first page of the notebook plunged him into an icy nightmare. "Baby, today I cut my arm again. The doctors said giving birth would kill me, but I wanted to take the risk, to show you this world." The content on the USB drives was even more suffocating. For the past 3 years, every crisis at the company had shadows of Natalie White and her mother, Mia Carter. And every time it was Ella Davis quietly resolving the mess, including the last corporate leak that almost got him jailed. She had even knelt before her grandfather, pleading for help. In one video, Ella knelt, forehead pressed to the floor. "Grandfather, please save Samuel. He just made a mistake." Her grandfather slapped her. "For a man who doesn't love you, is it worth it?" "I love him," Ella whispered. Samuel punched the wall, knuckles exploding, blood dripping. Suddenly, realization struck. He dashed out the door, racing to the hospital. At Renai Hospital's hematology department, Baron Collins looked at the bloodshot man before him. Samuel Reed, your wife disappeared after refusing treatment. At her last checkup, her hemoglobin was only a quarter of a normal level. Where is she? Samuel's voice was hoarse. I don't know. But the nurse said she often goes to a certain place. Naren scribbled down an address, King Shan Cemetery, southeast corner. The cemetery was deserted, rain lashing down. At the farthest southeast corner, Samuel found a tiny gravestone, with no photo, only a single line. My baby 2019. 3/2019. 6 fresh white roses and a rain-soaked notebook lay at its base. Samuel knelt in the mud and opened it. The latest entry read, Baby, tomorrow I'll come to you. Over the past 3 months, Evan covered everything. Natalie White spiked my tea and orchestrated the hotel incident. Those scented candles contain radioactive substances, but it doesn't matter anymore. Just thinking that I'll never see you again still hurts. Today I cut my arm for the 89th time finally, the pain is gone. Tucked in the last page was a photo of their wedding. Mayla had cut herself out of the picture, leaving only him standing alone. Tears fell onto the photo. Samuel called her frantically, but all he heard was the cold, empty voicemail tone. Then Ellen Parker called. Mr. Reed, we found her. She's living in a tiny shared rental in the old city. When Samuel kicked open the less than 10 square meter apartment door, a heavy stench of blood hit him. Ella Davis was curled on a moldy bed, her left tress gaping down to the bone, still bleeding. The sheets were soaked dark red. On the bedside table were empty bottles of sleeping pills and a note. Samuel Reed, I've left all the evidence for you. If you still have an ounce of conscience. Ella, Samuel cried, lifting her frail, paper-thin body. Only then did he see the deep cut on her inner thigh, the whim she had given herself as her final estate. On the ambulance, Ella leaned weakly against him. How did you? I found out what Natalie White did, the candles, the drugs. Samuel's voice trembled. I'm sorry. I should have believed you. Ella smiled suddenly, a pure, childlike smile. Samuel Reed, I'm finally not in pain anymore. Her hand fell limp. The monitor flatlined, a permanent, horizontal line. At the funeral home, Samuel personally dressed Ella in her favorite white dress. He noticed nearly every inch of her skin was marred by scars, back, thighs, ankles, all self-inflicted. The makeup artist sighed. She must have been in so much pain even while alive. 3 days after the funeral, Reed Group suddenly announced the termination of all cooperation with Carter Group. That same day, Natalie White was caught in compromising videos with multiple wealthy men. Carter Group's stock plummeted. A week later, the police raided the Carter family mansion and discovered illegal drugs and radioactive substances. Samuel Reed, you'll pay, Natalie screamed in court. That wretch deserved it, she stole from me. Samuel sat in the gallery, expressionless, watching Natalie sentenced. During a recess, he approached her, who was on the brink of a breakdown, and whispered, I've prepared a VIP room for you at King Shan Mental Hospital. Every day, someone will draw 400 cc of blood for me just like you did to Ella Davis. Samuel Reed stood outside the special ward on the top floor of King Shan Mental Hospital, observing Natalie White through the one-way glass. She was strapped into a restraint suit, her once delicate face streaked with tears. This was the VIP suite prepared just for her, soundproofed to perfection. Begin, Samuel instructed the medical team behind him. As the white-coated staff wheeled in their equipment, Natalie's eyes widened in terror. What are you doing? Where's Samuel Reed? I want to see him. The lead doctor's expression was impassive as he brandished a syringe. Daily extraction of 400 cc of blood, as ordered by Mr. Reed. The needle pierced her vein, and Natalie screamed, a raw, animalistic wail. Samuel watched coldly from the monitoring room, recalling the day Ella Davis had been forcibly bled to miscarriage. On the screen, Natalie's blood slowly drained into the bag, darker than normal. Mr. Reed, the test results are in, Owen Parker said, handing over a report. Traces of benzodiazepines were found in Miss Ella's blood, consistent with the poisoning symptoms in her medical record. Samuel's eyes darkened. Add another 200 cc. A sharper, more agonized scream echoed through the ward. 3 days later, Samuel personally entered the room. Natalie was now so weak she could barely speak, her wrists dotted with needle marks. Enjoying the game? Samuel asked calmly, sliding on medical gloves as he sat beside her bed. This is only the beginning. He pulled a pair of dental pliers from his pocket. I heard you once poke Tella's finger with a toothpick? Natalie's pupils dilated in terror. No please, Nada. Her screams continued for a full hour. When Samuel finally left, Natalie's teeth had all been pulled, leaving her mouth a bloody, foaming ruin. She collapsed on the bed like a dead fish. Meanwhile, in a suburban biological lab, Mia Carter was strapped into a custom chair. In front of her, a screen played footage of Natalie's punishment, while her ears filled with Ella Davis's final recording. Samuel Reed, I'm finally not in pain anymore. Please spare Natalie, Mia begged the guards, tears streaming down her face. Don't worry. It's your turn now. A white coat pushed a cart toward her. This is Reed Group's newly developed blood disorder treatment. It requires live testing. The moment the needle pierced Mia's arm, she let out a scream that sounded almost inhuman. The drug burned through her veins like acid. Soon, her skin began to ulcerate. Exactly like the late Madam's symptoms, right? The doctor murmured to the camera, as if aware Samuel was watching. Samuel indeed watched from the monitoring room, holding Ella Davis's diary. He flipped to a page. Vomited blood again today. The doctor said the side effects of the drug will eat away at the skin. Looking up at the screen, he whispered, Ella, they are paying back for you. The revenge continued for a full 3 months. Natalie was moved into a specially reinforced cage. Her limbs began to necrotize from long-term restraints. Mia Carter's skin ulcerated over 90 of her body, daily injected with experimental drugs. Samuel even recreated the squalid room Ella Davis had lived in before her death, placing Natalie inside and looping Ella's last words over the speakers. But the satisfaction was fleeting. Every quiet night, Samuel dreamt of Ella Davis dying in his arms, her blood soaking his suit. The warmth, the sticky, clinging sensation, it never left him. Not enough, Samuel muttered at Ella's grave, fingers tracing the cold marble. The pain they endured is nothing compared to yours. Rain fell, soaking the bottle of sleeping pills in his hand. He tilted his head back and swallowed the entire contents, lying beside Ella's grave. Ella, I'm coming to you. Consciousness blurred, and a harsh ringing pierced his ears. Samuel awoke abruptly, lying in the Reed Group office lounge. The phone displayed it 5 years ago, the week before his business-arranged marriage to Ella Davis. Rebirth? He muttered, pinching himself. The pain was real. Rushing to the bathroom, he saw himself in the mirror 28, yet untouched by the loss of Ella Davis. His phone rang. It was his father. Samuel, don't be late for tonight's dinner with the Davis family. That Ella Davis girl is impressive. Samuel clenched the phone, knuckles white. Fate had given him a second chance, and this time, he vowed, tragedy would not repeat itself. At the dinner, Samuel arrived an hour early, but Ella Davis was already there. She wore a pale blue dress, head bent over the menu, as gentle as he remembered. Miss Ella, Samuel's voice trembled. You're early. Ella looked up, offering a polite smile. Mr. Reed. Her eyes were distant, formal. There was none of the affection or anticipation of the past life. The dinner proceeded smoothly. Samuel, unusually attentive, remembered all her preferences, even peeling shrimp for her personally. Yet Ella maintained polite distance, subtly avoiding every attempt at closeness. Mr. Reed seems unusually attentive today, she said at the door when leaving. But this is just a business marriage. No need to go to such lengths. A pang hit Samuel's chest. It's not just business, I truly. Mr. Reed, Ella interrupted, gaze clear and unwavering, we're adults. I will honor my duties as your wife after marriage, and I expect you to respect my personal space. The words struck Samuel like ice water. This new life Ella Davis seemed to harbor no feelings for him at all. 1 week before the wedding, Samuel Reed had someone investigate this life's Natalie White. Sure enough, she had already begun spiking Ella Davis aromatherapy oils and spreading rumors that Ella was mentally unstable. Samuel stormed into the Davis household with the evidence, playing the surveillance footage of Natalie administering the drugs in front of everyone. Call the police, Samuel said coldly. Or I'll handle it myself. Shocked, Ella's father had no choice but to eject Natalie and her mother from the house. Samuel Reed didn't stop there. He contacted the detective he had known in his previous life and had Natalie White arrested for intentional harm. This time, I won't give you the chance to hurt Ella, Samuel murmured, watching the police car carry her away. But when he excitedly returned home to share the good news with Ella, he found her packing. Where are you going? Samuel asked, panic rising. Ella looked at him calmly. Mr. Reed, our agreement doesn't include you interfering in my personal life. She closed her suitcase. I think we need some time apart. Samuel realized then that this life Ella Davis not only didn't love him, she feared his overbearing care. He had returned, desperate to make amends, and yet was denied even the chance to redeem himself. Married life became a bittersweet torment for Samuel. Ella fulfilled her duties as the perfect Mrs. Reed, but every time he tried to get close, she built an invisible wall between them. One late night, Samuel discovered Ella wasn't in bed. He found her in the bathroom, applying ointment to several shallow cuts on her arm. Ella, Samuel rushed over and grabbed her hand. Her eyes widened in panic for a moment, then she regained her composure. Used to it. If it bothers you, Mr. Reed, I can sleep in the guest room. Samuel knelt and gently kissed the scars. Does it hurt? Ella stared at him as if he were a monster, pulling her hand back. You've been drinking, Mr. Reed. The next day, Samuel brought in Jason Miller, the doctor who had treated Ella in his previous life. Dr. Jason, my wife has tendencies to harm herself. Samuel handed him a check. Please come regularly to provide psychological counseling. Jason pushed the check back. Mr. Reed, therapy requires the patient's consent. She won't refuse, Samuel replied bitterly. She always listens to doctors. As expected, Ella attended the sessions. Samuel watched them closely and realized Ella trusted Jason far more than she trusted him. After each session, her eyes seemed brighter, and sometimes she even smiled at Jason, smiles that had once belonged only to Samuel. Jealousy gnawed at him like a venomous snake, yet he dared not interfere. These moments of ease were precious to her. 3 months later, Samuel returned home early to find Ella and Jason in the garden, drinking tea. Sunlight dappled her face through the leaves, and she played obsessively with the tubing on Jason's stethoscope. The gesture struck him like lightning. The old life Ella had done the same with his tie or cufflinks. Now, she offered that intimacy to someone else. Mr. Reed? Ella noticed him, her smile fading instantly. You're home early. Jason excused himself, leaving a meaningful glance toward Samuel. Your wife's depression has improved, but the underlying cause still needs further investigation, he said. That night, Samuel discovered Ella's antidepressants in her study. Under the box lay a medical record detailing her treatments since age 15. Patient confined by stepmother in basement for 3 days, developed severe claustrophobia. Samuel slammed his fist into the wall. In his previous life, he only learned of this after Ella's death, and now history seemed poised to repeat itself. The White family's threat to Ella had already begun again, in a different form. This time, I will protect you, Samuel whispered to himself. Yet fate seemed determined to test him. The next day, Ella requested a separation. I want to move to an apartment in the west side of the city, she said calmly. Dr. Jason says independence pace is good for my condition. Samuel had no choice but to nod. I'll come see you every day. No need, Ella smiled. You're so busy with work. On the day she moved, she only brought a few clothes and the medical records. Samuel stood at the doorway, watching her leave without a backward glance, the image of her dying in his arms from his previous life flashing through his mind. Mila, he whispered, but no one answered. The days apart were agony for Samuel. He waited beneath her apartment every day but dared not disturb her. One late night he saw Jason Miller's car parked below, it left only in the early hours. Jealousy and pain nearly tore him apart, but he had no right to complain. This life Ella Davis had never loved him, their marriage was purely a business contract. A month later, Ella summoned him to a CAF. She wore a simple white shirt and jeans, much more relaxed than she had in the Reed household. Samuel, she said, addressing him by name for the first time, I want a divorce. Samuel's hand shook as he held his cup, spilling coffee on his suit. He had anticipated this day, yet it still felt like a knife through his chest. Jason Miller proposed to me, Ella said, eyes lowered as she stirred her coffee. I want to pursue my own happiness. Sunlight streamed through the window, casting a glow on her face, a radiance Samuel Reed had never seen before. Suddenly, he realized that in this life, Ella Davis might finally attain the ordinary happiness she had longed for in the past life, the chance to be with someone who truly loved her. All right, Samuel heard himself say, but the villa is yours. Mila shook her head. No need. Jason Miller has a small clinic in the suburbs, it's quiet there, perfect for my recovery. The divorce was finalized quickly. On the day of signing, Ella wore a simple dress. Her unadorned fingers, free of rings, looked clean and elegant. Samuel watched her carefully read the documents and couldn't help but recall her frail wrists in the last days of her previous life. Wishing you happiness, Samuel finally said. Ella looked up and gave him a sincere smile. Thank you, Samuel. After the door closed behind her, Samuel sat in the lawyer's office for a long time. In his previous life, Ella had loved him to her last breath. This life Ella, however, wouldn't even give him hatred. He had returned to make amends, yet he had lost even the right to stand beside her. Leaving the lawyer's office, Samuel drove directly to Jason Miller's clinic. He needed to see for himself whether this man was truly worthy of entrusting Ella's life. The clinic was small but warm. In the waiting area, a few elderly patients and children sat quietly. Jason was listening to a child's heartbeat, his expression focused and gentle. Samuel stood outside the window and suddenly understood why Ella had chosen him. Jason embodied the safety and ordinary warmth Samuel could never provide. Mr. Reed? Jason noticed him and stepped outside to greet him. Samuel handed him a file. Ella's medical records and allergy history. She's afraid of thunderstorms. Jason took the file, his expression serious. I'll take good care of her. Those words shattered the last of Samuel's stubborn resolve. He turned and left without noticing the complex look in Jason's eyes. After the divorce, Samuel threw himself into work. He acquired several pharmaceutical companies, dedicating himself to research on blood disorders, the hereditary disease that had taken Ella's life in his previous life. 5 years later, at a medical summit, Samuel saw Ella Davis again. She wore a white lab coat and stood beside Jason, presenting their latest research. Applause thundered across the auditorium as Samuel watched from the back, greedily drinking in her brilliance. With the aid of gene editing technology, we have successfully blocked the vertical transmission of hereditary blood disorders, Ella's voice carried across the hall. Samuel's eyes burned with unshed tears. In her past life, she had been willing to die just to carry their child. In this life, she had finally conquered that terrible genetic disease. After the conference, he ran into Ella in the hallway. She was visibly pregnant, around 5 months along. Samuel, Ella exclaimed with delight, I didn't expect you to come. Samuel forced himself not to glance at her belly. I heard your research was successful. Yes, Ella said softly, cradling her abdomen. The IVF procedure bypassed the genetic defect. The baby is healthy. After a brief exchange, her colleagues called her away. Samuel stayed behind, watching her walk away gracefully, recalling her frail figure from the past life. This time Ella had all the happiness she deserved and it had nothing to do with him. Another 5 years passed. Samuel read in the newspaper that Ella and Jason's clinic had received a prestigious medical award. In the photo, Ella held a little girl who clutched the trophy with a radiant smile. The article noted that the child was conceived via IVF, completely free of Ella's hereditary disorder. Samuel locked the newspaper in his safe, alongside Ella's old antidepressant box. He never remarried, only sending an anonymous white rose each year on Ella's birthday. At 60, Samuel was hospitalized for a heart condition. His attending physician was none other than Jason Miller, now a renowned expert. Samuel read, Jason handed him a letter. Ella asked me to give this to you. The note was brief. Samuel, thank you for letting me choose my own path back then. In this life, I am truly happy. Samuel pressed it to his chest and closed his eyes. When the heart monitor flattened into a steady line, no one noticed the white butterfly fluttering through the window, gently landing on his bedside table. There sat a yellowed photograph, their wedding photo. But this time it was Samuel Reed who had been cropped out. In his final moments, Samuel felt as if he were reliving the day Ella had died in his arms. Samuel Reed finally not in pain anymore. Ella, he shot upright, finding himself in the familiar hospital corridor. Nearby, the young Ella Davis hurried past, holding a medical file. Was this another rebirth? Or merely a flash before death? Instinctively, Samuel followed her but paused at the corner. Ella and Jason were standing together, heads close, studying the same medical file in a tender moment. Mom! A little girl ran to Ella's arms, beaming. I won an art prize. Samuel leaned against the wall and smiled silently. Whether dream or reality, as long as Ella was happy, that was enough. He turned and walked away, his silhouette blending into the corridor's lights. Outside, the white butterfly took flight, soaring toward the blue sky, carrying away all regrets and lingering attachments.